What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Engadget's live coverage of CES 2021 at our virtual stage. I'm Senior Editor Devindra Hardwar. I'm joined with our Senior Editor of Mobile, Chris Velasco. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Dev. How's it going, bud?
It's going okay. I love your colorful background. That's going to give me joy all day as we go through all these CES announcements. How are you doing? How are you feeling about LG's event so far? Let me tell our viewers here, the way we cover CES is a grueling affair, right? We are working the week before, the weekend before, usually at Vegas. Now we're doing it remotely. It feels a little different. It's nice not to wake up and trudge to a conference room to go see, LG's press conference. But how are you feeling about all these changes, V?
So Shalin and I talked about this a bunch when we gave our opening remarks for CES
Yeah.
2021 a little earlier this morning. But look, there's always going to be something lost without the physicality of CES. As I mentioned earlier, I'm very much a field person. Like, I enjoy events and I'm very good at them.
And especially for
trudging
TVs,
down
right?
to
You want to go see them.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And LG in particular always has some of the most ostentatious displays at their booth, right? So not being able to see that this year does kind of feel like a big loss for the company.
Yeah. I miss the video wall, right? Every year at CS, I think for the past 5 years or more, LG has basically created this crazy wall that's powered by OLED. It goes over the ceiling and everything. You walk through, it's like a tunnel. We're not going to get that this year, but what we are going to get is a new family of OLED. So they're talking about their OLED Evo technology, which just looks like, better quality OLED, brighter, which is nice because I think as perfect as OLED TVs can be, they're not as bright as LCDs. And that's kind of the thing Samsung and other companies have been pushing. If you have a bright living room with a lot of windows or something, an OLED may have a hard time competing against all of that external light, whereas an LCD can go, over 1,000 nits super easily. So it seems like LG is kind of tackling that with OLED Evo. Do you have any thoughts about this? This is sort of like their top end OLED, I guess, with the G series.
It's tough to say, right? Because I'm very much a practical television person. I have an old 65-inch 4K. I think it's like a Echo, back when the Echo was a thing. I've got one of those, and it works fine. So, going through a lot of these announcements, especially where LG and its displays are concerned, I feel like I'm very much the quote-unquote average consumer. I understand that things are better and that things that are newer tend to be better as well, so I should probably spend my money on those. But break it down for us. What are, as a sort of regular person, at least when it comes to TVs, what should I be looking for, and what is LG delivering that I should kind of be aware of?
I think the thing I'm noticing most about the OLED Evo tech is just that it is a slightly more souped up version of what we've seen on the OLED screen so far. Let me tell you, for the past couple of years, the OLED screens haven't really changed that much. The big new thing is HDMI 2.1, which is going to deliver faster data speeds, support for 8K video, and also support for 4K beyond 60 FPS, which is really good for gaming. So last year's OLED TVs, the CX series, they had HDMI 2.1. I've played around with the 48-inch version. That's a great, pretty much perfect gaming TV. It has variable refresh rate. So if your frame rate is not, right at 60 or right at 120, the TV can still smooth out gameplay. So it'll look pretty good. I think this year, the Evo stuff looks fine. It looks very, very nice. I'm not sure between that and like the rest of the C1 series, I do think like there are just more choices this year, right? So if you want a super big one, there's an 83-inch set for the first time. And between what we've seen at Sony and Samsung too, it does seem like big TVs are becoming a bigger deal now, right? People can actually afford them. They may actually have space for them. Maybe as we're all stuck at home too, they're thinking about, maybe I need to really upgrade that 65-inch with something serious, right? So I don't know, how big. I know you have an apartment in Brooklyn, V. Is 65-inch like the maximum you'd consider in your space?
I could squeeze more. Like, I'm grateful to live in like an apartment that's like decently sized, because I do live kind of out there in Brooklyn. So I do have
You're not
room
out there. You're not that far.
it feels okay. Fine.
Yeah.
You are the New York expert. I gladly defer to you. But yeah, there's definitely room. I could feasibly move up to like an 80 something. But again,
Crazy,
as sort of an average TV consumer, size is obviously a big deal, but do you not face, drops off in resolution at that point? Like, how do you sort of balance the need for a big TV versus the best picture quality?
I think, the thing we're seeing this year too is there's a lot more talk about 8K, right? So there are 8K OLEDs, there's 8K LCDs coming from LG, and a lot of these companies, I've asked them like, how do we deal with 8K when there is no 8K content? It's going to be
Right.
years before. HBO just went to 4K. It's going to be years before that stuff is ready, and everybody's just really talking about the upscaling and the fact that you're going to be pretty close to these TVs. So if it's like 80 inches or above, you'll probably want something that's maybe a little more than 4K, because the last thing you want to do when you buy a $5,000 TV or whatever is to see pixels. If you're sitting down, you're enjoying things, you're paying for a high quality image. 8K screens seem like they're going to be the things a lot of companies are just pushing this year for big screen sizes. And I kind of get that. On the other hand, when we were going to theaters, when those things existed, most of the theater screens were 4K, digitally projected screens, and you were watching a screen that was 30 feet tall. So yeah, if I couldn't really tell the pixels there during a movie or something, I think I'm going to have a harder problem at home with a 80-inch screen or something. But that is the big sell, right? If you're going beyond 80 inches, maybe want 8K. We're seeing a lot of companies take that seriously, and I feel like that could be interesting. But the overall health of your TV panel, it matters a lot more than 8K, right? So make sure you have HDMI 2.1, whatever you're looking for. Look at your brightness, look at the technology behind it. I think what's more interesting this year for for LG is that they're actually bringing in mini LED technology into their LCD lineup, their nanocell TVs. And normally, I think we just ignore those TVs, right? Because they're LCDs. They're fine,
Right.
but LG has all these OLEDs over here. I'm going to look at the best TVs on the market, right? I'm not going to look at these LCDs. But mini LED is really interesting technology. We saw it last year with the TCL 8 series. I ended up buying one of those. I wrote it up in Engadget, so you can check that out. It is a really cool technology, right? Because it's all about solving the backlight problem for LCDs. And the thing is, if you remember, maybe like 2010, 2012, LCDs mostly had like side lighting, so you would get this weird
Oh yeah.
splotchy gray look for cheaper TVs. Eventually, we moved to full array backlight, so individual zones that would light up and give you a more realistic sort of contrast. And that is fine, but the amount of those zones really, you have to pay more to get more zones. Mini LED is all about getting you to hundreds and thousands of LED zones. They're much smaller now, more localized lighting, so better bright levels, better black levels, which has always been a big problem for LCDs. So I'm going to be really interested to see how well those look, because on my TCL 8 series, it looks pretty good. I didn't want to pay for another OLED. I already have a 50-inch OLED, 55-inch OLED. I need something bigger. For $1,000, a 65-inch TV that had all this new tech was a pretty good deal. So I feel like that's going to be a big thing for LG moving forward. Maybe you'd want to take a look at those too. Yeah.
Just to clarify for people like
Yeah.
me, so it seems like the big draw when it comes to mini LED is that they've managed to shrink down the LED package itself. So
Yes.
they're basically just
Smaller
able
LEDs.
to squeeze, get a much more density behind these panels. So you get more control over what's being lit and what's not. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. So right now we're looking at a couple different technologies, right? So there's normal LED backlighting, which is pretty much on all the existing LCD TVs. There's mini LED, which is smaller and can get you 1,000 individual lights. There's micro LED, and this is where things get a little funky, because that's what Samsung and Sony are really pushing with their giant, wall displays. So Samsung had the wall. They have, a more consumer version of those micro LED screens coming. Those are basically LEDs that are so tiny they're turned into OLEDs. Right? Every individual pixel is lit up and controllable, and that's going to be cool. Those things are expensive. Okay, the last year when we priced out the wall for Samsung, that thing was over $300,000 if you wanted a 150-inch wall, right? So you're not going to do that. Most people, I think, are going to be more into the mini LEDs and what that could bring. So I think for people on a budget, if you have $1,000 to spend or less, because hey, TCL actually just announced early in the fall their 6 series are all mini LEDs. They start at like $700. You can get a good 65-inch for like 850 from them. That's going to be a better deal for everybody. For somebody who can't afford OLED or doesn't want to make that leap, you're going to have some really good looking LCDs moving forward. So I think you should be excited about that as a like mainstream TV buyer.
Okay, so in the short term, keep an eye out for sort of mini LED power TVs. Micro LED, going to be a while before that's sort of commercially viable for regular
Right.
people, right? Gotcha.
I think that's
So
the
what
main
do you
thing.
make? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's the main thing. But what do you? I'm interested in what you have as questions. I know you're a tech nerd like me. Hey, everybody watching this, you're probably watching us for a reason because you're really interested in the tech behind all this. We've loved OLEDs for the past few years. If you look back at our CES awards, which Engadget has been handling for a while now, our top TVs are usually LG's OLEDs just because they offer the best picture quality. Perfect black levels, great contrast. I do think maybe the tech is getting LCD tech is getting a little better too. We have more alternatives. So yeah, what is really exciting UV about what we're seeing here?
I got to tell you, at least with respect to LG's press conference, I think it's important to note that like TVs was obviously a huge part of it, but they also went ham on like a lot of other stuff, right? And granted, they're not always things we would necessarily cover at Engadget, right?
You
Like
don't
if
want the
you
giant robot vacuum? Come on.
well, we're going to get to the giant robot vacuum, but this is distinctly a phenomenon that I've experienced moving into my 30s. I really like fridges now. Like I really have
Fridges
opinions
are
about
good.
refrigerators.
Hmm.
So
I
just
mean,
seeing,
I hear you.
yeah, go
I
ahead.
hear you, V. So what about these new fridges? Because hey, I'm somebody in 2020, I moved from my apartment in Brooklyn to a house outside of Atlanta, and all of a sudden, all these appliances. I'm really looking at the tech behind it. What is exciting to you from what you're seeing?
I mean, we're going to see a lot of sort of interesting smart home development with LG. I do have to say, on
Mhm.
the whole, from what I understand, they tend to be lagging a bit behind Samsung, but that might not necessarily be a bad thing, right? Samsung has its
Sure.
like a long line of family hub TVs with giant touchscreens attached to them. The
Yeah.
many of the refrigerators that we saw during the press conference today are just nice fridges that kind of get a shout out. So again, like I said, things we might not necessarily cover on Engadget,
Mhm.
but things that still matter to people nonetheless. I
Yeah.
do
Let
think
me tell
that
you, V.
moving,
By the way, like
yeah.
LG has a lead with everybody and appliances when it comes to reliability. And that's the thing. If you buy a fridge, you buy a washing machine or whatever, you don't want that thing to break for 5 years, right? Or 10 years. And you want to be able to replace those parts easily. That's one area where Samsung really lags behind. So, yeah, LG, when it comes to home stuff, look up reviews. Like they're typically better rated in terms of reliability, in terms of, what the value that you get. Was there anything specifically about these fridges? Because I see one with like a transparent window that looks pretty cool, so you don't have to open it to see what's inside.
Yeah, well, see, and like that's not an unusual thing. LG's approach to
Hmm.
this is having a transparent window. Samsung's approach is to have a camera inside the fridge that you can sort of view from the external display.
Hmm.
I still have not fully figured out why you shouldn't just open the fridge. I guess if you're really concerned about, I don't know, like a
It's not great for the
flan or
environment. Yeah.
something setting. But yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. I want to turn quickly to LG's. I believe it's called the Wash Tower, which is their sort of stacked washer and dryer. And again, things that we normally would not care about at Engadget, but they
Sure.
made a big point of playing up AI this year, which is very interesting. We've seen it obviously in their televisions with respect to upscaling and sort of image management. But when it comes to washers and dryers, you typically don't expect AI to play much of a role. But as it turns out, the Wash Tower has built-in sensors that use AI
Hmm.
to determine not only the size of your load, but the fabrics that are actually being processed. So if you've
That's
thrown in a bunch
nice.
of jeans,
Yeah.
the AI will sort of treat those differently than towels or something, which is kind of wild, right? Like the AI invasion of the smart home has been a thing that's been in motion for a few years now, at the very least. But sitting here watching these companies sort of unveil the fruits of their labor, melding AR and AIs
Mhm.
rather and hardware, it kind of feels more real to me now than ever. Where do you land on the smart home stuff, Dev?
It does seem like it's getting better and better, right? So the idea of washers sensing the types of fabrics and like, the types of loads, that's something that's actually it's kind of been happening for years, right? They can tell how heavy they are and it'll manage things like that. But specific fabrics, that's kind of new. And I think you talk to people and you're like, why would I want, a smartphone connected, an internet connected washer or dryer? And I ended up picking a couple of those LG units up as I have to like build out everything I need for a house. And it is nice. It is very nice to just be like working and be like, oh, my dryer is ready, or my washer is having an error or something, like being connected to our devices because we rely on these things so much. I think is super, super helpful. So I'm not sure about like the AI sensing and everything, but just having a washer that could tell me, hey, I'm done. Please move it to the dryer until we have a robot that can do all that work for us, or a connected machine that'll just dump it right from the washer to the dryer. I find that useful. I like having the reminders. And I
Yeah,
think people
I got to
appreciate
ask
a lot of
real
that stuff.
quick. Sorry,
Mhm.
since you are the one person at Engadget who seems to be currently in the process of like putting together your home. You recently moved. Congratulations! And from what we can see, at
Thank
least,
you.
your space looks pretty chill. I'm down with it. What do you think about the idea? What if we turned your home into like a smart home studio where you just like install all of the new smart home stuff and just sort of test it as it comes in? And the benefit is you get to live in a slice of like 2022 right now.
Hey, I mean, I like that idea. Also, that's basically what I've been doing because I have like the Nest thermostat and everything. So, me being the tech guy, I'm finally looking at all these appliance things we normally see at LG's CES press conference and Samsung and everybody and being like, how can I actually use this in my house? And maybe we can make room to test that eventually. I'm sure my wife will not enjoy all the more boxes, more things that we have to deal with.
Oh
But
God.
yeah, it's kind of exciting. Anything else with LG? Because we normally talk with, or we see news from LG Display, which is another part of the company. And
Right.
this is what people should get clear, right? LG Display typically works on the raw display technology. It's the stuff that's years ahead and not quite shipping for consumers. But we see some really, really cool stuff from LG Display, right? We saw the rolling TV before through LG Display before they actually started shipping it. This year we saw, what did we see? A transparent OLED that they could install at sushi bars, so you can actually have, I guess, a barrier between you and the sushi chef, but also something to watch as you're chowing down on sushi. That looks kind of cool. Any thoughts?
Hell yeah, right? Like it's a sneeze
Yeah.
guard plus display. Like what is not to like about that? Especially practical. I mean, look, I don't know when the next time any of us will wind up in a sushi bar will be, but it's good to know that there is something innovation-wise in the pipeline that will help us out once we get there.
Yeah.
And actually, really interesting. Speaking of LG Display and sort of the rollable TV, we got our first glimpse of LG's rollable phone, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
That's the
Yeah.
first.
What do
So
you
this
what do you
has
think?
been yeah, this has been kind of an open secret for a while. I believe the first rumblings of LG's rollable phone came from about 2 to 3 years ago, if not more. But it's been an open secret
Mhm.
for quite some time. They've been like cheekily hinting at it for a while too. But LG is a company that, at least in terms of its smartphones, has not had the same kind of popularity, the same kind of momentum as
Right.
its biggest rival, Samsung. They've completely sat out the foldable race so far, instead focusing on accessories that kind of give LG's existing smartphones a second screen. So you'd have basically a sort of a smartphone and a half, if you want to think
Yeah.
about it that way. What we're getting
Hmm.
with the LG Rollable is what feels like a really tremendous response to all of Samsung's momentum in foldable. So if you haven't seen it, it's available, I believe, just very quick looks in the intro and the outro of LG's press conference. But you see someone holding the phone horizontally, and it appears at first to just be a regular, roughly 6.5 inch smartphone with a 6.5 inch
Hmm.
smartphone display, but then one side kind of rolls up and kind of gives you that small tablet, which could be interesting for a lot of reasons, right? You're not going
Sure.
to get the crease, no visible crease, which continues to be a sticking point for people who are contemplating foldables but maybe aren't sold on them yet.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and just generally, LG makes good screens. Like I'm really curious to see this thing. LG, as you mentioned, has experience with rollable TVs, so hopefully that expertise transfers over. I'm sure it does to some extent. But that
For sure.
also brings up really interesting questions about durability, right? Because having a hinge in a phone is one thing. Like, it's arguably
Yeah.
not amazing for long-term durability, but it's sort of a known quantity at this point. But you figure if you've got a rollable, there are motors involved, there are more moving parts, there's more complexity. One has to really wonder how viable something like this is in a device that you're going to throw into a bag and probably drop more than a few times.
Mm, yeah, or put in your back pocket and sit on repeatedly throughout the day
Oh, yeah.
too. Like
Oh, that's me.
it is
I'm that
wild
guy.
to me. Yeah, you're that guy. I've seen all the phones you've broken. It is wild to
Not that.
me that LG has kind of let Samsung take the lead with folding phones and everything because LG is the source of so much OLED technology, right? LG makes the OLED screens for Sony's TV. LG makes OLED for a lot of other companies. Samsung only uses OLED on its smartphones and and tablets, right? So they're better with smaller OLED. Do you think LG was kind of they announced the Flex. Remember the LG Flex like 5 years ago?
Oh
And do you
boy,
think they were
yeah.
burned by that, by experimenting with it?
I mean, I will say LG has had a really rich history of just like trying stuff out and sort
Mhm.
of brushing it off when things don't work. You're right, the G Flex line, such a great example. It was one of the first
Cool.
sort of curved display phones. And unlike Samsung's curved display phone at the time, it sort of was like banana shaped, so it kind of fit the contours of your face, which was like not a bad idea. The problem is, I'm sure they were more expensive to make, and also it's not like it's dramatically better to use than a regular smartphone. So they decided no. But what's interesting about what LG has done recently with smartphones is they've launched what's called the Explorer program, which is, to my understanding, almost like a skunk works within LG. They'll sort of cook up wild concepts. We saw one not too long ago, the LG Wing, which is like a smartphone that swivels, so you get like a horizontal screen and a second screen under
Uh-huh.
it. We unfortunately never got around to reviewing it because there was just so much to review in 2020. But
Hmm.
it's weird in a way that LG has always been really good at. And the beauty, as I understand it, of the Explorer program is LG does not care if it makes any money off of these things. Like if the Wing
Yeah.
absolutely flops, they will continue to just try weird stuff. And weird stuff is what LG does in phones. The G5, the first really truly modular smartphone, or one of at least compared to the
Hmm.
Moto Zs of the time. Like they're not afraid to let it all hang out and just like eat S word if it doesn't go to plan. So hopefully the Rollable kind of continues in that vein, right? Like I love the concept. I have a Galaxy Z Fold 2. I love having a phone that's also a tablet when I need to be, but the execution could be cleaner, and that's what the Rollable
Hmm.
would be great for. I just hope it I hope LG has like the cojones basically to stick with it, even if it
Hmm.
doesn't sell, because it's probably not going to sell.
Yeah, yeah. Most likely, I feel like 95% of the things they come up with just never go anywhere. But hey, we kind of need these big companies like LG and Samsung to take those big swings and take those big hits early on because it's hard to know what's going to succeed. And also, with the geek side of me, I wish LG was running like a reality show or something, right? Of this Skunk Works team, just like every week's like, whoa, well, what crazy idea do we have now? What's going on? Phone that folds up like a triangle, a phone that flies. I don't know. I want to see that reality show. That's the Project Greenlight I'd love to see because I think that would be a lot of fun just to see a company like LG really dive into a lot of these problems. That would be something. I wish they were doing that with the Skunk Works project.
That would be such a great thing to see because LG gets this reputation, right, of like
Yeah.
kind of doing whatever it wants with smartphones, and sometimes it seems to take feedback, and other times it doesn't. So it has this reputation of just being kind of aloof and ineffectual in some ways. But if we had that reality show, if we had a view into the product development process and seeing how seriously people are taking really weird ideas, I think everyone would walk away liking LG as a company a whole lot more.
Yeah, a reality show hosted by that weird CG character they created for the
Oh,
press
oh my
conference.
God.
Oh
So,
my god.
okay, didn't see this. I was sort of
Yeah.
watching the stream with one eye and like typing notes with the other eye. So it was kind of a weird, not great situation for me.
Mhm.
But when I saw, her name is Rhea Keane. When I saw Rhea Keane for the first time, I was like, oh, they just got like a cool young to talk
Uh-huh.
about this like UV sanitizing robot for a bit. Turns out she's not real. Like I totally did not
Mhm.
pick up on it. I'm the worst.
She has an Insta account. She is like as real as like any other young, connected person is, okay? I believe in her.
I look, having been successfully fooled by LG, and in fairness to me, right? Like I had the stream going in a small window, so there's plausible deniability. I'm not a complete human idiot, but credit to LG. Like I did not see that one coming. It still hasn't really
Mhm.
clicked for me that I was not a real person because I don't know, like it seemed close enough at first glance. And really, that's one of the big hurdles for sort of AI influencers and sort of virtual influencers to cross, right? Like we're seeing VTubers, we're seeing sort of virtual influencers really starting to make their mark on culture as a whole. I did not really expect or understand that LG was kind of working on this, but
Uh-huh.
hey, man, like culture is one of South Korea's greatest exports. So if LG can bring this crazy like virtual influencer stuff to bear on the rest of the world, sure, man. Like, why not go for it?
Sure. I've seen Macross Plus. I know how this ends. I want
Oh
my
yeah, this
Sharon Apple
Sharon
LG
Apple situation.
idol.
Yes, Sharon Apple.
Yes. Yes.
Why I
I
love
think
you,
that would
Jeff.
be a lot of fun. I'm not sure why more companies aren't pursuing this because, hey, it is what all the anime weebs would really be into. Having your little idol, a social channel or something to follow. We'll see what's happening with Ryakim. Any other? We mentioned some stuff, and LG went over a couple of things. There was a giant robot vacuum that looks like
Oh,
it could be useful for hotels. I guess.
are
I don't
we
know
are
what the
we
plan was
thinking about
there.
the same? The one that I saw and latched
Mhm.
onto was the like UV sanitizing robot that Ray Akeem was talking
Yes.
about. But okay, so yeah, that's just like apparently they announced this at the end of last year, and I think the original intent might have been for this to be like a restaurant robot that just like
Right.
goes through
Right.
and like sanitizes surfaces, and like when it sees or detects a person, it just sort of scuttles out of the way or allows itself to be moved by someone who works at whatever establishment is using this UV sanitizing robot. But look, yeah, sure, LG has had some history with robots, arguably not as much as others, but yeah, I'll take one of these. Like I would have
Sure.
this in my
Mhm.
apartment if I could. I know
I mean,
Shereen would
hey,
want.
let me tell you, having a robot vacuum is super helpful, and on many levels. If you're lazy like me, but you want your floors clean, I'm glad that those are getting cheap. I would love to see LG kind of playing more around that space too, because I know they have a couple. We've got just a couple minutes left, V, but I have to ask, like, how are you feeling about what LG is doing this year, and what would you like to see more from them? They announced some new LG Gram laptops. We don't really talk about those a lot, but they're really light. They're really
Yeah,
big.
they're
They can
perfectly
offer big
fine with me.
screens and they're super light. Yeah.
I think more than anything, what I'd like to see is kind of a more cohesive fabric connecting all of
Right.
these smart home devices, which is like, look, I could say that about Samsung too, right? Like they've been at it for years and they still haven't really gotten anywhere. But I think what's really heartening to see about LG in this case, at least, is sort of seeing some of those tendrils, some of those threads starting to come together. They mentioned, for instance,
Mhm.
how their ThinkQ app can pair with like your appliances. So you can, and this is like a very weird example, but you can, I believe, order what looked like food packs. I might have missed it, but what looked like food packs from Nestle or Kraft Heinz, those are sent to your home. You scan the QR code, and the app on your phone sends the cooking instructions for that particular food pack or whatever to your oven or your microwave. So like you're starting to see LG weave this fabric more thoroughly. I don't think it's there yet. And I think what's really going to be important for the next few years is LG locking that down, at least as best it can.
Mhm. I'm honestly surprised that LG still has. I'm surprised that LG has so much more to show us. Because we're coming off of 2020, a year when a lot of us were in lockdown or not working, in the office, and even though Korea handled it better than a lot of other places, I'm surprised. Like, hey, LG is still pumping out new TVs, new products. Not really important in the grand scheme of things, but impressive, I guess. Do you expect them to kind of ramp things up? Because this foldable phone, how far away do you think that is? Do you
I
think that is a year from
firmly,
now, 2 years from now?
I have no concrete information, but I would be willing to bet that rollable phone happens this year.
Like end of the year type thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, yeah. If at the latest, this could easily
At
be
the
like a late summer, fall release. I could see that happening for sure.
I do wonder if like our release from the pandemic and after everybody gets vaccinated and things are safer, are people just going to go crazy and splurge on like the things that'll let them be outside but stay connected too? Because we're not going to want to be stuck inside our homes for much longer too. So it kind of makes sense. That's when LG is really going to get out there with better mobile tech because maybe there'll be a rush on newer, better smartphones, or we're going to be spending more time, using our cellular connections rather than stuck at home using our ISPs. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell. I'm, as our first, LG is always our first CES press conference. And it's a
Right.
thing where we normally have to like wake up, really get going for the show. And this year, not too many surprises, but I still think this is a good showing, for LG. We're also going to be talking with LG, one of their home entertainment executives, Tim Alessi, later this afternoon. So if you want to hear more about, our chats about OLED TVs and, how many mini LEDs are going to the nanocell TVs, stay tuned to that. That's going to be around, I believe, 3 p.m. Eastern. Yeah. Cool. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you so much, Chris Velasco. I hope you're doing well. And what are we looking forward to? What is next for us here at the CS Live Show?
Well, we're now moving directly into the Samsung press conference.
Oh boy. So this is the one we always love for. So thank you everybody for joining us and enjoy Samsung. Let's see what they're cooking.